In this edition of ICIT Fellow Insights, we'll speak with Stan Wisseman, an ICIT Fellow and Business Development Manager at Micro Focus, on the important role SecDevOps plays in building more secure applications and improving the resiliency of an organization.
Stan Wisseman, ICIT Fellow. I work for Micro Focus and I'm a Business Development Manager. And that's a good question because there's a mystique around DevOps, as to what it is. If you look at where we were with cloud computing 5 to 7 years ago, it's around the same thing. Like, what does this mean? And if you look at some of the attributes of what DevOps is, it is about rapid application delivery, but how do you do that? And one way is through automation. Another way is by integrating these teams to actually work together throughout that process. I think that the challenge folks have around the concept is how do you quickly roll out applications in a way that hopefully you're not just pushing out poorly developed applications. You want to have high quality as well as just something fast out in the market. The real driver to this is that organizations have found that they just need to be able to get these products out faster. They need to be able to serve their customer base, their user base. Some organizations have been born into this and they are able to do DevOps very well, and they actually are pushing out into production on a daily basis, even multiple times a day. Other organizations are just saying, okay, look, we had previously an annual cycle, let's do it quarterly. So the frequency varies. Just because you have the Facebooks and the Netflix of the world, they're able to do it on a daily basis, if not multiple times a day, doesn't mean that you have to. It just means that you're able to do it much more efficiently. Well, that's been the assumption. There's been a lot of articles and a lot of hype around the fact that DevOps is going to create more secure applications, and we actually did a study last year about this. We went out to see what the reality was because there's this promise of more secure apps through DevOps. The assumption being that, well, security will be one of the groups that's pulled in, just like your ops team and your quality team. And the survey did show that 99% of the folks that we surveyed agreed, yes, there's this opportunity, there's a promise of actually creating more secure applications. The reality is much different though. Only 20% had actually integrated in security testing throughout their life cycle, and 17% hadn't done anything. I think one of the challenges is that security is typically still isolated in the organization structure, and you also don't have the accountability for security in these development organizations, and so they assume that there are other controls downstream. You'll do late life cycle pen testing, there are other controls to mitigate the risks, and so it's not happening unless, we found that if you previously had an organization that integrated security into their software development lifecycle, then it's higher likelihood that they were doing it within DevOps because they took it as a priority. There's an assumption that security is going to be one of those silos that's brought into this DevOps organization by default, and it's not happening. And that's one of the things that's a roadblock. The other is that they don't necessarily understand how application security testing can occur without slowing them down. And so how do you integrate security testing without adding friction to their continuous integration, continuous development pipeline as they push applications out? And that's one of the things that, again, the security team needs to be working closely with the dev team to actually demonstrate how you can do this. So that's one of those challenges that can be overcome, but we need to demonstrate how you can reduce the friction in that pipeline, but still push out secure applications. Yeah, so first off, there are a lot of tools that are being used in the DevOps environment. So there is no cookie cutter way of doing it. Every environment's a little different. Even within an organization, they may not have a standard set of tools that they're requiring their developers to use, but you need to look at it end to end. And you need to look at trying to get that feedback to the developer right away. And so right when they're actually developing the code, if you can have a plug-in into their IDE, then you can actually give them that feedback. It may not be as comprehensive as a full scan, but you can give them that feedback right away. Likewise, you can have interactive application security testing that as they're testing out their app functionally, it can give them that feedback as to whether or not there are any kind of security vulnerabilities or weaknesses. And as you continue, I mean, if you look at the check-in process, the build process, that's another place, an opportunity you can actually do scans. You may not, again, have the time to do a comprehensive scan, or you need to look at ways in which you need to get that feedback back quickly. And then later in the life cycle, you can do dynamic security testing, it's before it goes pushed out to prod. You need to look at those integration points throughout the whole development process. And then the mindset, just like you have continuous delivery as a goal in some organizations, continuous security. So not only throughout that process of development, but also when it's in production, because given the rapid deployment of these apps, you may not have time to remediate. So how do you mitigate the potential vulnerability that's exposed? Because you may or may not be aware of it, but you want to be able to still push out that application to prod, so you may put a RASP or a runtime application security protection or a web application firewall in place to mitigate that. Again, there's the organizational challenges that we face, and the fact that many times the security group is in a separate line and is siloed off. The perception by the dev teams that security is going to be handled by somebody else, and they don't necessarily include it. If you're not sitting in the stand-up meetings, and actually putting a sticker on the whiteboard indicating that, yes, you need to fix this security bug, or this security feature needs to be included in this sprint, then you're not going to be accounted for. And so, one of the things that's a challenge is scaling your application security team, or the folks that are your representatives. And so typically an application security team is not that large, and yet you have all these dev teams in the different groups. And you need to be able to have champions or evangelists that are maybe part of your team, but maybe folks you've trained that are developers that have a knack for security, that are in those rooms and actually in those meetings representing the security perspective. And it's a cultural change. It takes time. I think the other challenge, again, is just the feedback loop, getting security findings back to the dev teams in a timely manner. I think the other aspect of that is sometimes that speed, you can introduce false positives, or you don't have to have time to triage as much as you'd like. And so there's nothing that turns a developer off more than having to spin their wheels on a false positive. And so you do have to come up with a method of baselining your results and giving them valid findings and not wasting their time, because you don't have many opportunities to get their attention. But first off is the study itself that we put out, the true state of application security in DevOps. That's available on our website, so if you look for that report or look at Fortify DevOps, you can find that report. Another great source out there is TechBeacon. So techbeacon.com has a lot of articles on application development as well as security, and as a focus on DevOps security. There are a number of books out there, like Gene Kim has a great book out there, How to Do Security Within the Context of DevOps. You're right in the sense that we have a real focus on how we can actually help integrate security in to standard software development life cycles as well as DevOps. We are the only one out there with an end-to-end kind of solution that can give that immediate feedback to the developer, as well as continuous monitoring of applications. So just go ahead and go to our site, and you can check out what our offerings are. Well, I think raising awareness in general is something we all need to do as far as the cybersecurity issues, and you guys have done a great job as far as facilitating events that bring public sector, private sector, academia together, as well as the research efforts. I mean, James is a machine. And as far as his tapping into a need of raising awareness of the threat actors, the different legislation acts that are going on, and the background behind it, some of these major breaches at OPM, and now Equifax in the latest report. I think that's been a real value add to the community, because it's one thing when you have a vendor come out and spin our particular viewpoint, and we're ultimately trying to position our solutions. But when you have a third party that is trying to raise general awareness of the threat, of the ways in which we potentially can actually solve these problems, that's what's needed.